So the second round of the OHL playoffs about to get underway Thursday night, and the Barrie Colts have a meeting with the Kingston Frontenacs. It's kind of 2018 all over again as the Frontenacs and the Colts renew their playoff rivalry. And to talk a bit about this series going into it, we're joined by a fellow broadcaster and play-by-play voice of the Kingston Frontenacs, Scott Rogers. And Scott, this matchup, I think it was kind of expected once we got this playoffs rolling that we could be seeing a Barrie Kingston second round matchup here.
No, for sure. And I will tell you, as somebody that sits up in the press box in Kingston and does these games, um, I can only speak for myself, but I was not looking forward to taking on the Barrie Colts. So, Tim Cunningham, who's my color guy on our broadcast in Kingston, always speaks very highly of the Colts over the last few years, and certainly this year. They as Tim describes them, they were built for the playoffs. And so I think it's going to be a great matchup. And I think they kind of match up pretty well. So we'll see what the next, 10 to 14 days brings.
Well, it was interesting at the start of the season because a lot of people were talking about Brampton, Oshawa, Brantford, Barrie as the top four teams, but nobody was talking about Kingston. They kind of flew under the radar. They do the big trades at the deadline, and they've caught many by surprise. And of course, now sweeping the Sudbury Wolves in the first round for the first time in franchise history. This is a team that can't really take too lightly.
No, I'll tell you something, Mike. Going into this season, my expectations were low, quite honestly, for the team, and rightfully so. They did not have a spectacular year last year. Got beat in the first round, kind of got in at the bottom of the standings. Got beaten 5, I think, by North Bay, if I'm not mistaken. So fall comes, season starts. But as the season went along, especially in that first, and again, I'm just talking about from my view in Kingston, they made a couple of deft moves over the summer. They went and got Cedric Gano from Owen Sound, veteran guy, scores 30 odd goals every year. And another trade that went under the radar, and again, I can only speak for myself, that surprising at how it turned out, they picked up Thomas Euronen from the Ottawa 67s. Now, Thomas had a knee injury last year. I think he played 12 games. From memory, 7 or 8 points. Doesn't jump off the page at you. A later round draft pick by Las Vegas. But that guy has been an absolute spark plug this year. And the other big surprise, and again, we would have no expectation of this guy, but Emil Pieniemi on the blue line, who was Kingston's first round pick last year, right, in the import draft, didn't come the first year. And Kingston kind of has a checkered history, and I don't want to go into too much more than that. But then he came this year, and oh my goodness, wouldn't every team just like to pick up a point per game defenseman and drop him back on the blue line? So, again, going into this year, we knew that Jacob Battaglia was back, second round pick of the Flames. You knew he was going to progress, or you would have an expectation that he would progress, and he absolutely did. 40 goals, scored 30 last year. His skating's really improved. But it was those, again, I refer to them as those under the radar moves that general manager Corey Cooper made over the summer, picking up Euronen and Gaindel, and they have paid off in spades for sure.
Yeah, and then you've got the coaching staff with Troy Mann, and it seems as though since he's been brought on, this Kingston team is looked different. They play different, and they're a team that you can't take lightly. And right now they're dominant on home ice, setting a new franchise record for that win streak.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. I was hoping we would get a chance to talk about that because it is absolutely one of the biggest differences between this Frontenacs team and maybe any going back maybe 10 years. Troy Mann is a professional coach, right? He's coached, I don't have his resume in front of me, but I'm going to say 15 years, maybe closer to 20 years in the minor leagues of pro hockey. So his mentality is completely different. No disrespect to the coaches that the Frontenacs have had over the last 5 or 7 years. But all you had to see was one interview clip of Troy Mann. And you could just tell that the guy's been through the wars. Nothing that's going to happen in front of him on the bench is going to phase him. And I think he has been an absolute a steadying force because they've had a couple of emotional coaches, we'll call them yellers and screamers previously. And not to say that Troy doesn't, raise
Yeah.
his voice, but just it's just a completely different vibe when you're like me, you're looking at the bench. You're not on the bench. You're looking at the bench and you can't hear, but you can just tell it's a completely different vibe. And the other thing we hear is that there's a great vibe in the dressing room this year, which is not always the case every year with any junior hockey team. We just hear so many stories about everybody on the roster pulling in the same direction. There's no eyes out in that dressing room. It's all us. It's all team. They had a couple of guys that maybe weren't um, of that mindset, and they were moved during the season. And it's just a completely different attitude in the dressing room with the Frontenacs this year.
And then, of course, the deadline, bringing in that Memorial Cup experience with Willis and Ethan Hay, and it goes to show that the Kingston Frontenacs they mean business, and they're relying on those veterans to get them over the hump to maybe go on a deep playoff run here.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you say that, Mike, because when the trades happened, keeping in mind the trades were with Saginaw, it's funny. I think there was three different trades, all with Saginaw, over the course of 4 to 6 hours in early January. Um, but they're from Saginaw, so we don't see these guys, right? They
Yeah.
come to your town once a year. We knew Joey Willis because he was on the U.S. Junior team that won the gold medal. So you got to see him play a little, but even in the World Juniors, Joey got hurt. I think he only played 2 games. Um, don't really know Ethan Hay. Don't really know. Oh dear, I'm pulling a blank on the defenseman.
Oh,
Help me
Bishop.
out. Thank you, Will Bishop. Uh, and so you go to the stats, and they're not guys whose stats jump off the page at you. Other than Will is 6'6" and he's a defenseman, so you got to love that. But then you find as you watch them for 5 or 7 or 10 games, and Ethan Hay is a killer on the faceoff. Like the man's winning percentage has got to be 60%. And you watch Will, he's a big, big defenseman, but he skates well for a guy that's 6'6", and he's the guy that settles things down more in their own zone. And then Joey Willis has jumped off the page many nights. He had a 4-goal game, and honestly, my favorite thing about Joey Willis is that his nickname is Joey freaking Willis.
That's
It's
awesome.
not. It's Joe. So imagine you're reading it. It's Joey parentheses Joey freaking Willis end parentheses Willis. I love it. I,
Oh,
I
that's
love it. Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And
Anyway,
then and then you guys also pick up Charlie Schenkel from the Sioux Greyhounds, and it's like the same thing you're just talking about. You don't see the Greyhounds all that often here in the Eastern Conference. So you've got Schenkel too, that he went on a deep run last year with the Greyhounds in the playoffs last year. And man, oh man, did he look impressive in that series against the Sudbury Wolves.
well, he did, and it's funny. Um, so when Charlie came to Kingston, like his first, 8 to 10 starts, I'm not going to lie to you, were not spectacular. He won, right?
Hmm.
They won because Kingston, has deep scoring, and there's a reason they're in the second round outside of Charlie Schenkel. But I feel like maybe the last couple of games of that Sudbury series, he's maybe now locked in and will be that goalie that the Sioux saw last year. Charlie, he struggled his first little bit in Kingston. Save percentage was well below 900, like into the 850s, 860s, those first 5 to 7 games. Again, I think he was undefeated. But, when Kingston's scoring 6 goals a game, if your goaltender lets in 3 on 20 shots, it kind of goes unnoticed in a way. But I think he's finally found his form. If you watch him, he's quiet in the net, always square to the shooter. Lots of good things. And the guy's 6'5". There's a joke in sports. You can't coach size, right? So when he
Yeah.
goes down the butterfly, he's still taking up, 78% of the net. But yeah, it seems like he's found his game, and that'll be good news for Frontenacs fans for sure.
And are you noticing a bit of a buzz in the city with this Kingston Frontenacs team? Because obviously the history of the Frontenacs, there's been some disappointing years and some years where they fall short. But do you get a sense that things are a little different this time around with this club?
Yeah, Kingston's a funny hockey city. Again, I should be upfront. I don't live in Kingston. I travel to Kingston to do the games, but certainly, spend some time there. And I'm obviously in the rink during games. There's definitely, especially now that they're in the second round, you're absolutely right. I think there's going to be um, some more energy in the rink. I mean, this playoff hockey is completely different than the 68 games that come before that, right?
Hmm.
And so, that first round against Sudbury, you could feel it. Kingston doesn't get to the second round very often. There are franchises that's been around for over 50 years. They've never been to Memorial Cup. They've never even won the East. So, fans, when they start to, they see the team getting into that second and third rounds, you start to think maybe this is the year. And again, Barrie's a fantastic team. And again, this is going to be a great matchup. But it's nice to have that feeling around the team as a broadcaster.
Hmm.
There was the team that had Gabe Vilardi 7 or 8 years ago that had a couple of good series. Uh, Ultimately, I think they lost in the semifinal for the East. So even that was, I mean, that's great, but it's a bit of a letdown. But this team, the difference that I think with this Frontenacs team is they're deep in scoring. They do have scoring right down to the third line. Their fourth line has been improved. I apologize. I don't know how Barrie has benefited, but the Frontenacs have brought in at least one player, and I think maybe two on the new ruling where you can play in the OHL and then go play NCAA hockey. So Kingston has a young lad named Kieran Dervin, who they drafted last year, didn't come because his plan all along was to go to, as it turns out, Penn State University. And so he was playing at St. Andrews College. And that guy, his first game, he looked like he'd been playing in the league for 3 years. He is an elite player. This is his draft year, but he plays on the fourth line because you look at those top three, they've clicked all so well together. In any other year, he would have probably come in and dropped in on maybe the first line or the second line. But the joke I've made with Tim, our color guy, is how many teams' fourth line center runs the second power play unit?
Right.
Because that's his role. That's his role. He's up at the top on their second power play unit. But he's a guy maybe to circle as, again, he's not on the first line. He's on the fourth line, so he doesn't get the ice time. But don't be surprised if you see him involved in the score sheet over the course of this series.
And I know for the Barrie Colts, defense is an area that is of strength for them. So that, going forward, that, you're going to see the defensemen carrying the puck out. They're going to be aggressive offensively. But looking at the Frontenacs, this blue line, we don't hear too much about them. But who are some of the standouts for you that you've noticed during the regular season?
Well, again, Niemi coming in, again for us, kind of out of thin air, right? The Frontenacs organization knows him, and probably had some scouting reports, but we don't see that stuff. And I think it was halfway through the first period, our first break in our first broadcast. I turned to Tim and I said, "Who's this Niemi guy?" Like he just like instantly,
Yeah.
he stands out a little bit because he's not small, right? He's 6'3", but just the puck it was like Velcro on his stick and was really very, very good at moving the puck around. If you want to go down their blue line, Quentin Burns, veteran defenseman, third round pick of St. Louis, really smooth skating, tough defenseman, loves to get involved, and has really had more consistency in his game this year than maybe last year. It felt like maybe he took a step back last year, but maybe playing with better players, better teammates, more talent brings the best out in you. He's had a really good year. Will Bishop, who we mentioned earlier, again, what blue line wouldn't want a 6'6", 200-pound defenseman, right? I mean, seriously. But then you've got the opposite extreme. We have Cal Ewens, who is, I think he's listed in the program at 5'10", but I think that might be in skates. And I'm only kidding, of course, if Cal happens to see this or his parents happen to see it. But he's a leader, is in the middle of anything physical on the ice, doesn't back down from anybody. Fantastic positioning, right? He doesn't have the size, so he's got to be smart out there. And he's really good about taking, angling guys off. He's laid out a couple of big hits this year for a guy his size. But I think our favorite defenseman, when I say our, I'm referring to my partner Tim Cunningham. Our favorite defenseman is Malik McGowan.
Mm.
He is a bowling ball out there. He's been in the league long enough now that I think he's a player when you're on the other team, you always are aware of where he is because if you lose track of him, he's probably going to put you on your pants because he is physical to the nth degree. Not dirty, doesn't have a ton of penalty minutes, just such a good body checker. We've seen him lay out a few hip checks. Like we thought that was gone. That's been out of hockey for 30 years, but he's had a couple of hip checks. And again, he's a guy that loves to play that physical game and is a really good skating defenseman. So this year, because he's third year in the league, a little more confident, getting a little more involved in the offense.
Well, I think with the way that this is shaping up, I know Barrie won the season series 3-1, but those were some close matchups during the regular season. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at a series that could be going pretty long, and we'll be a little busy on the broadcast front.
I think so. I would not be surprised, Mike, if this series went seven. That would not surprise me at all. I know, just as you touched on, that it was a 3-1 season series for Barrie, but all the games were close. Kingston's only win was in Barrie, so that certainly is in the back of your mind when the playoffs come, right? But yeah, it's going to be exciting. Of course,
Well,
it's going to be exciting. It's playoff hockey. Come on.
well, I was just gonna say the playoffs. It's the best time of year for junior hockey fans or hockey fans in general. So it's gonna be a ton of fun. It gets underway Thursday night. Colts and the Frontenacs. And Scott, thank you very much for doing this, and I'll try and keep an eye out when I'm down in Kingston.
You bet. You bet. I'm looking forward to a great series. And thanks for reaching out, Mike. This is great. I've really enjoyed this.
So that's Scott Rogers, the TV play-by-play voice of the Kingston Frontenacs, and I do believe this is going to be a very entertaining matchup between the Colts and the Frontenacs. Gets underway Thursday night at the Saddlein Arena for game number one. We'll have that broadcast on Rogers TV. Puck drop is at 7, and then of course game 2 on Saturday, and then game 3 in Kingston. I plan to be on the road for that one. That's going to be on Tuesday. Cannot wait to get back to the rink in Kingston. Haven't been there in a few years, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the series is going to be a ton of fun, and keep an eye on for those recap videos as we follow along the series. So again, thank you very much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Talk to you again soon.